industry. So I will try to give some background on what's going on worldwide, not only in Europe. And if we look at the agenda, I will then continue with an explanation of different use cases in the IoT space and a definition of what LPWA is. Then we will continue with an high-level overview of the evolution towards 5G, to finish with a short briefing on the Telit roadmap with the relevant products in these technologies. So let's get this webinar started from the IoT technology deployment status in EMEA. And in this chart, basically you can see the evolution over time of the, allow me to call them a legacy technology, what we are all using so far, like 2G or 3G, and the newest technologies in 4G with the different flavors of 4G. If we talk about 2G, yes, Dominic, you said shutdown. Actually, this could be a threatening word, but the situation is not the same all over the world. And if we look at the EMEA landscape, we can definitely say that 2G will last for some years yet. And in this slide, I wanted to put as a milestone one of the first official statement by a major operator, that is Swisscom, that has been the first to declare the 2G shutdown by 2020. Then, of course, we will see if they are able to do it really, but definitely this is the first sign that something is going to happen. But in general, I would say that at least till 2025, most of the major MNOs are verbally giving their commitment for coverage. And I can also tell you that the situation is even better for 2G compared to 3G, because there are some cases, and here, for example, I'm mentioning the statement by Telenor that is announcing the 3G sunset by 2020, before their sunset of 2G. And Vodafone, for example, declaring their need for refarming the spectrum. This does not mean that they are going to close the technology, but they will start by that time to allocate more resources of their spectrum in favor of the new technologies that they have to serve, that are 4G and the upcoming 5G. But I would say that at least for some years, those two will still offer a good coverage in our continent. And when it comes to 4G, we know, of course, how the LTE Cat 3 and 4 is already a standard available in the market since a couple of years already, not only for mobile handset but also for IoT devices. In the last year, it became popular also in Europe, following the trend in US, the LTE Cat 1. And now, of course, we have the upcoming technology Cat M1 and narrowband IoT that will become relevant for real designs starting from next year. If you notice, I put a comment in the arrows that are showing a migration from 2G and 3G to the newest LPWA technologies that are not solid lines, but I did it on purpose because there will not be a mass migration, but some designs will start to consider the new technologies, and in the next slides I will explain which are the use cases that most likely will address this change. I also put a comment on VoLTE, because also for this functionality, voice over LTE, the situation is slightly different from what is happening in US, because the situation in Europe is much more fragmented. We have several countries with several operators, And because of the availability still of voice services on 2G and 3G, there is not a big pressure for having VoLTE, but definitely this is a technology on which we are working and that will become relevant for IoT in the future as well. And in particular also for CATM1, that is one of the two recent technologies defined by 3GPP release 13. So if this is the landscape of the technology in EMEA, in this other slide, I'm showing you what is happening in US. Here, the situation is much more clear. In fact, the move is represented by solid lines from 2G to 3G and then to LTE, first Cat1 and then recently on CATM1. This is mainly driven by the move, official move of the two major operators that are AT&T and Verizon. You probably are already aware of the AT&T shutdown of 2G starting from this year, and Verizon will phase out its CDMA network as well around 2019, and this is valid also for AT&T that already has plans for phasing out their 3G offering. And this is basically already visible because we are already over the period of acceptance of new devices in their certification process. So if you have a new product with 3G and you want to certify, in US this is not possible anymore. This does not mean that there is no network. The network will be there till 2021. But this is a clear move to force people to adopt the 4G technologies. The first move starting a couple of years ago was to have customers migrating to LTE category 1 because it was the first possibility to have a lower cost solution in 4G, still offering enough throughput for high quality voice and mobility and IoT applications in general in terms of data transfer. But now you have probably read all the press releases by AT&T and Verizon announcing their CATM1 nationwide coverage. So this is definitely the technology that they are pushing more to the market. Then we will have to see which are the use cases that are more suitable for one or the other. The only differentiating operator is T-Mobile that wants to keep 2G, even if with small capacity, and attract customers that are going away from the 2G of AT&T, for example. And also with regards to LPWA, they are promoting more narrowband IoT rather than CATM1. I have also a slide for China, just as an example of one of the countries in Asia Pacific. I will not spend much time on this. Of course, I have also all the other information for the other countries in Asia Pacific that are relevant for the IoT business, like Korea, Japan, Australia. I prefer to focus on European situation and US, more relevant for business opportunities. But of course, if you have any further questions, do not hesitate to ask to our partner RAN Solutions, of course, and we can, in the background, give any further information for business opportunities and suggestions for technological adoption in those countries. Just to mention, in China, the situation is a bit more complex also graphically because there are three major MNOs that have different technologies from GSM to TD, CDMA, CDMA, EVDO, or standard 3GPP UMTS, and different flavors of LTE. 2G is still representing a big market in China at the same level of importance of the push that now we can see for narrowband IoT, mainly driven by the Huawei initiative in the domestic market. So, if we continue giving a look to the use cases that are justifying a migration, I put here some examples. And the general idea is that as Telit, for example, we are not forcing or recommending the change to everybody just because there are new technologies that are popular or upcoming to the market. But of course, it's a matter of understanding if you need or not to change. And for example, if we are talking about an application of security, for example, that is requiring throughput for video surveillance, for example, or for some metering complex architectures where the throughput is still relevant and cannot rely on the low data rate standards, maybe the move from 2G, 3G to LTE Cat 1, for example, could be interesting, and also the fallback that is possible to 2G could give some backup in terms of coverage wherever the LTE signal would not be enough. And this is also a technology that, in the case of security applications with emergency calls, for example, is also allowing voice. And this is, of course, a choice that is future-proof. And in terms of future-proof, the second example is for longer devices life cycles. If you have the need for a new design now, because the previous product were based on 2G and 3G, but you have to deploy something that you have to commit to your end customers for 10 plus years, of course, it starts to be problematic to address this need with 2G and 3G, because we said that they are still present for some time, but for longer commitment, maybe it's the time to think about Cat M1. If, for example, you're looking to mobility and voice capabilities, for example. On the other hand, if the application is cost-sensitive, data-only, stationary, with very demanding performance in terms of battery power, in this case, the alternative to 2G, for example, could be narrowband IoT or LoRa or Sigfox in the unlicensed spectrum technology. And we are talking about simple applications like sensors, some trackers with limited functionalities. But the main difference in this case is that these applications are not products that are transmitting periodically every hour, for example, but the transmission is more driven by events that are sporadic. Another example could be again the metering industry or some sensors that needs to be very low cost and today based on proprietary technologies. And in this case, the choice could be to go for a standard 3GPP cellular connectivity, and based on the features and technical requirements of the application, consider Cat M1 or narrowband IoT. So what is LPWA? LPWA is, of course, an acronym for Low Power Wide Area Network, and it has been defined as the new area of technologies that are focused in supporting solutions that must be low power, both in terms of processing power and transmission power, and with the expectation, as I said before, of a longer battery life. Needless to say that the objective is lowering the cost of the solutions. There is an ideal target of reaching, not tomorrow morning, but in the long run, the cost of today GSM applications, and even better when the technology will have enough economy of scale. And another important and recurrent topic that you probably already heard several times is the possibility to provide extended coverage, and in particular better in building penetration and being able to serve all the devices that today have difficult installations with the current standards. Last but not least, this might be something new for some of you. You have to know that there are also working groups in 3GPP that are working in order to bring at a standardization level also the unlicensed spectrum technologies, and this could also bring new opportunities for private LTE networks, enabling new use cases in LPWA. This is up to now something peculiar for products and technologies based on LoRa and Sigfox, but the scenario will change. And how it will change? It will change because, as you can see here, the evolution of the standards is comprehensive of all the different flavors and features of the different technologies. It was very well known last year, the release of the 3GPP standard 13, that was ratifying eMTC, that means LTE-M, or in other words, LTE category M1, and on the other side, narrowband IoT. But there are several other aspects that will be put on top with the upcoming release 14. We are talking about improvements of the power consumption. We are talking about improvements of the mobility or the location capabilities. And with the following releases 15 and 16, the standard will address, on one side, the evolution to 5G and the so-called new radio, NR, and on the other side, also working groups, as I said, working on the unlicensed spectrum. So if you have the feeling that 5G is a different story, is a different technology, this is not really the case. I like to use the example that 5G is kind of an umbrella that will embrace several aspects. What is peculiar today of the LPWA technologies, and on the other side, embracing other aspects. And this is what I'm trying to tell you in this slide, where I say multiple standards to serve multiple needs. In general, when people are talking or thinking to 5G, it is pretty natural to address topics like the ultra high speed, typically data rate above the gigabit per second, and the so-called low latency. But if we focus only on these two aspects, it would seem that we are not considering the LPWA end devices. And the reality, as I said a minute ago, is that 5G is embracing several aspects with different requirements. And in particular, there are three major scenarios. One is the so-called extreme mobile broadband that basically has the use case of speed, so high throughput, and we are talking about massive content. So this is one of the first that I mentioned at the beginning. The other is the so-called UMTC, so the ultra reliable and critical machine type communication. So we are talking about massive control, and this is the second area related to the low latency. But last but not least, we have the massive sensing scenario. That is the area where all the LPWA technologies will evolve, enabling devices that have a use case of very few bit per second data rate and very low power consumption requirements. So if we look at IoT, at least my view of IoT is to split this big environment into two major use cases. On one side, we have the emergency applications or real-time notification that can be put under the umbrella of the UMTC, so the mission-critical applications, and on the other side, the data collection and reporting, so the simple sensors deployments that will represent the big volumes in the future for IoT, so the massive low-end IoT. Of course, there is another aspect that, for example, can be represented by video surveillance services and applications. That is also IoT and could be relevant. In this case, we are talking about the extreme broadband. Today, to be honest, there is not one technology that is fitting all these scenarios. or at least there are technologies can be used. For example, if you need throughput, you go for LTE Cat4, Cat5, Cat6, etc. If you need low power, low cost, and low throughput, you go for the newer standards. But none of them is really suitable and peculiar for each sub-segment. In the future, the cellular communication will support all these scenarios. And the question could be, will they be able to coexist, or do we risk to have a jeopardized ecosystem? Before going to the solution, and I will show you an example of how this aspect will be addressed by the new technology, I just want to give you a few indications about the market trends and the adoption rate of LPWA is, in particular for the licensed technology, is probably the highest in terms of CAGR in the next 5 years. This is, of course, driven by the mandatory move away from 2G and 3G in some markets. Of course, I'm not referring to Europe, but I'm more thinking to the US market, where several applications started to design on LTE Cat1 and recently adopting also voice over LTE. But the upcoming LTE Cat-M1 deployment is definitely representing another game changer. So the evolution is really fast. There was no time to put in mass production LTE Cat1. That is already time to address the LTE Cat-M1. And this could be relevant for applications requiring a lower cost compared to LTE Cat1, a limited speed, but still good to support several use cases that, as I said before, could be using mobility or some voice functionality, even if not in high quality, etc. So also here the question could be, what's next? What's next with 5G? My recommendation is to keep calm. Okay, so it is true that as they presented in the roadmap of the technologies and the 3GPP releases, 5G is coming. Is coming in 2020, but in 2020 we start with the fixed broadband applications. It's more a matter of demonstrating high throughput functionalities, low latency, etc. But for the real IoT story in volumes, we believe that is more a 2025 story. So if you have the need to migrate, you don't have to wait so much. LPWA, if it is suitable for your applications, can be considered without hesitation right now. It can open also new opportunities for you and new revenue generators. And there is no conflict with the upcoming 5G and no issue of compatibility. I mentioned before the new radio, but this new radio will not replace the current architecture. There will be an overlap. So there is no reason to wait for the next generation. If we look at the segmentations in terms of technology, I already mentioned some of the technologies and use cases for example, higher categories requiring throughput for Cat1, for some security applications, telematics applications. But the focus of today's webinar is more on the right-hand part of this slide. And if we talk about Cat-M1 or narrowband IoT, of course, we're talking about smart metering, we're talking about sensors, some asset trackers or e-health applications. And depending on the region and on the carriers that you are going to use and their roadmap, there could be the need to adopt one or the other. So what about Telit in this space? I take the opportunity of showing you some of the products that we are putting into the market for the different families that we have. For those of you that are not familiar with Telit offering, this is the so-called 910 family. So it's a form factor with which we deliver all the possible technologies and all the possible configuration, from GSM to LTE, passing through 3G. Of course, on this form factor, we designed, certified, and put in production the LTE Cat4 and Cat1, but now there is this request from the market to go backward, and we are talking about Cat-M and narrowband, and you can see how we can have multiple solutions, depending if you need a dual mode solution supporting both the technologies, or maybe if you are requiring a GSM fallback because you are not comfortable with a scenario that is not ready in terms of coverage. We have a regional variant to address different countries: North America, Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia. We have also the global variant in the roadmap that could be a solution to optimize your logistic and also your design without differentiating into many variants. And of course, these are also devices that are already ready and available by our partner, RAN Solutions, and if not ready in terms of samples, because we are talking about a variant that is coming in early Q1, for example, but they are for sure ready for pre-orders. And if this is the 910 family, we have also the 866 family, that is the smallest in our portfolio. This is very suitable for the regional approach, where you have the need of a small solution without the ambition of having a global product. And for example, for designs in North America that have to move from Cat1 to Cat-M1, we have two possibilities for Verizon and AT&T. Instead, in Europe, if you have the need, for example, for a narrowband IoT product because one operator, and in Germany you have the two major operators that are pushing this technology, this could be the right candidate as a replacement of 2G. And by the way, it's not a case that this module 15 by 19 millimeter is on the same form factor of the GSM device. Let me also spend a few words on the European situation. It is not a black and white story. It is not a situation in which you have to choose narrowband because one operator in one country is promoting this, and you fear that this is not going to be used by the others. It's more a matter of marketing placement of the different technologies, but I can tell you that in steady state, all the operators will be at the end supporting Cat-M1, because this is something that is required as a natural replacement of the GSM GPRS use cases. Narrowband IoT, in my opinion, should be treated differently for new opportunities and devices that, as I said before, are not communicating frequently, but driven by events. And this is the reason for which there is no need to be worried about the fragmentation. It's more a matter of understanding what your products will require. Last but not least, at the moment we have also a design in progress on LoRa, on this form factor. That actually is a combo LoRa and Bluetooth Low Energy that could be relevant for those that are thinking to deploy in those markets where the operators decided to go for LoRa instead of narrowband IoT. Orange, for example, is offering LoRa and Cat-M1 to differentiate themselves from the others. This is instead the L865 family, that is an LCC form factor, not an LGA, that is smaller compared to the 910. This is for us the best seller in 2G, and this is why we want to give a migration path to all our customers that in the future would like to migrate from GSM to narrowband IoT or from GSM to Cat-M1. And I can tell you that the narrowband IoT product is already under design with samples coming soon, and in Q1 next year we are also planning to have the CATM1 variant with GSM fallback. That, in my opinion, could be a nice solution for our region as well. So, to summarize in a bit, in a second, the discussion, which are the aspects that are behind the decision and the challenges if to migrate or not? Well, of course, you have to look at your applications. You have to understand which could be the right form factor for your product line. You have to understand the functionalities that you need, and if narrowband IoT or LTE-M are more suitable for you. If you need 2G fallback, which are the bands that you need and which is your time to market and lifespan. Remember I said if you have to put into the market a product tomorrow and this product must live for 3-4 years, I would not be worried or scared about the 2G shutdown. But if you want to design next year something that will be ready in 2019 and that you want to put in the market for 10 years, maybe is the right timing to consider a migration, at least at design level, trialing, testing, and of course, Telit through Run Solutions can support you in this analysis. Of course, the cost trade-off compared to 2G and 3G must be considered, and I understand, I'm not a salesperson, but I understand how this could be really one of the most important factors to drive your choices in the future. And if I have to summarize the situation, I would say that with regards to narrowband IoT, this is facing a predictable, in my opinion, delay of at least a couple of quarters in Europe, but for me it's not a delay. For me it was normal that a new standard is taking some time to go to market, because it's not just a matter of the standard on the paper, it's a matter of the silicons, the protocols, the integration at module level, and the design of real products in parallel to the interoperability at network level. Definitely Asia Pacific, in particular China, is more active, even more active than Europe. And as I said, it's a technology that is relevant. It's not a hype. It will happen for sure, but probably we have to look at it from a different perspective. LTE CATM instead is already a reality in US, but it will become soon in 2018 a reality also in Europe. Then we have the unlicensed technologies that are at least now leveraging the advantage of being early to market. They did the first move, so you can already find solutions available for this as well. In this slide I'm not mentioning 5G, but as I said before, this is not contradictory. This is our future from here to 2025. Let's have the standardization of 5G in all the different flavors that I have explained before defined, and then you will see that there will be a natural transition to the new standards as well. If I have to give you a takeaway from this webinar, I would say that you should remember that in Europe and Asia Pacific, GSM is still representing a relevant volume of connections in the next 5-6 years. Same for 3G, except for North America. And it can still be offered as a technology, but in particular for local deployments, because if you have, for example, a tracking application that you want to design now and you have business in Europe and overseas, it is clear that you cannot go with GSM or 3G in US. So probably it's time to think about CATM1. Maybe CATM1 with fallback to 2G in Europe and LTE only for North America. Global applications, I said, but also product life cycles of 10+ years. So I can confirm that Telit current focus is on these new technologies. Not on 5G, because 5G is not a technology yet, just to Just to clarify, every time that you see an advertisement about a solution above 1 gigabit and they call it 5G, well, this can be at least a pre-5G standard, but it's not a real 5G. And of course, there are other technologies that we can bundle and that we can design around to serve the different use cases in IoT. Needless to say that if you have any further questions, you don't have to hesitate and you can address those questions not only for the webinar but also for the technology in general to Run Solutions. And so with this, I take the opportunity of handing over back to Dominic, that I think would like to spend a few final words on this also in terms of the offering. Okay?
Yes, thank you. We're at Run Solutions. We're producing also products with the Telit modules. As a few of you might know, we have like the ping pong. This is a quick start board for IoT. Right now we have it also ready for, besides 2G, 3G and 4G, we have it also ready for Sigfox and LoRa. And for all the products you see here, we are planning to also bring out a version for the new technologies. So for narrowband technologies, and to bring it out a little bit faster, NanoTrack is one of our smallest tracking devices we have here in-house, as you can see with the gummy bear. It's only 40 millimeters high, and we also plan to bring it out as a narrowband version, or CAT NB1 version and CAT M1 version. The Senseiver is like an industrial sensor to cloud gateway, where you just plug in the industrial sensor, for example, a 4 to 20 milliampere interface, and this is like a triple play. So what you get is also a Telit SIM card and a connection to the Telit Cloud portal. So this works out of the box. You connect the sensor and see your data in the cloud. And last but not least, we developed an extension board for the famous Raspberry Pi computer. This is a plug-and-play board with cellular connection. So as many of you know, Raspberry Pi is also pretty famous in the industry and gets ruggedized more and more. And with this board, you have the possibility to connect also via mobile network, and soon also with the new version with the new mobile technologies, or LPWA technologies. So that's from my side. All these products you can find in our store, and yeah, I think we're now at the end of your presentation, Marco. So we probably start the questions and answers route.
Yes, I have already received a few of them. Let me just have a look. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, I hope so. Yes. Well, for example, someone is asking if when I refer to private network, I mean the mesh network installed in cars, for example, taxis in the city. Well, not only. This could be an example, but typically for private networks, we refer to architectures in which you are not using, for example, a public APN for different reasons, reasons of security or other requirement. This is, from my perspective and the customers I'm talking to, a peculiar request of alarm panels producers, for example, or also some smart metering network. Yes, mesh network is one of the aspects, but it's more a matter of not of the topology of the network, but the way in which it is open to the public web or not. And also, you know that Another way to talk about private networks is, for example, to think about LoRa or Sigfox, and you just install your own antenna, you deploy your own number of sensors, and you build your own network. Okay, all these use cases will be in a way managed by the new standards in 5G as well. So there will be a mix of the possible solutions. And I take the opportunity of this last statement to answer also another question. Sorry, just a second. Because someone is asking about the 2G installed in poles used for street lighting. If I understand correctly, the question is which is the right technology, I guess, to replace this.
Yes, I would understand that as well.
Okay. So honestly, I think that for the time being, the perfect technology is still something that is allowing or a mesh network, or at least an architecture that is allowing the messages to hop from one pole to the other. And this is not yet a characteristics of the 3GPP standards, but it is in the working items and working groups that are going to be standardized, looking forward also in this case to 5G. And so it will be possible to have, for example, mesh networks also in the cellular environment, not only using proprietary protocols that are today suitable for applications like street lighting. Then I have another question that I just received regarding VoLTE. You mentioned VoLTE being a bit delayed on some LTE categories. What about SMS over LTE? Is this expected to be supported over all LTE categories in all markets? Yes, I can tell you that once we certify voice over LTE in the SKUs, in the variants for the North American market against the specification of AT&T or Verizon, also SMS over LTE, that is called the SMS over IMS because the architecture is different, are required and are supported by our products. I'm not a software engineer, but I was told by our R&D team that this is transparent for the end user. The technology behind, of course, is different, but yes, it is supported. And I was not actually saying that it is delayed. I was saying that VoLTE in Europe is not so relevant yet. I am personally talking to the major MNOs in the region. They have the service already launched for the consumer applications, so you can buy the brand new iPhone and leverage the voice over LTE functionality. But when it comes to IoT, it is not automatic. They have to tweak and fine-tune the settings of the network for the dedicated IoT deployments. And the risk that I see is that because of the fragmentation of the operators and in different countries, there might be the need of customizing also the settings of the products across the different countries. It's not like in US that with two operators you cover all the 50 plus countries of the region, just with one operator or the other. But it is something that it is coming. Operators are not yet mandating this functionality in Europe. As I said before, probably because there is not yet the pressure of lacking GSM or 3G voice services. But as Telit, I can reassure you that we are working on it. We are in contact with, in particular, a couple of operators that are willing to put their laboratory at disposal. And we are going there with our Alien 10 Category 1 and Category 4. because with the maintenance release, we want to add VoLTE also for the European variants. But also, and in particular, for the Cat-M1 technology, with our ME910 solution, we are already in contact with a major network provider in order to simulate the VoLTE capability, even if on Cat-M1 VoLTE is a 3GPP release 14 feature, we can do some pre-release testing as well. So for those of you that next year will think about a product based on Cat-M and requiring voice, you will have it also with Telit products.
Okay.
I'm checking some additional questions that we got. I think that we still have a couple of minutes to go.
Yes, I just can talk about one question that was about the webinar recording itself. So we will send out an email in the next days for you guys to download also the webinar as a video file, or at least to have a YouTube link or something like that. So don't worry if you missed, for example, the beginning. You can still check it out in a few days on our YouTube channel, for example.
Okay. There is a question regarding voice on LTM1. I think that probably, without knowing that the question was coming, I probably already answered. Actually, the question is if it is implemented from start. Our first release of the product that we are sampling right now is without voice, but because, as I said, it is not a feature that is standardized in release 13, but we are doing in the background some testing, and it will be available in the first maintenance release of the product. The other question instead is why would one use Narrowband IoT over Sigfox or LoRa for a low-cost sensor? Well, as usual, my position is always agnostic. I mean, I don't have any advantage in pushing one technology or the other. Of course, Telit is coming from an history of cellular communication and know-how, but as you have seen, for those that are aware of our portfolio, we have also since several years the unlicensed technologies, and so if there is the possibility to help our customers, we do it. My personal opinion is that if you have a local deployment in a country where you can install easily Sigfox or LoRa, and it's a matter of, for example, adopting a sensor for a factory or for a limited town, etc., LoRa or Sigfox could be the solution. But every time, and I tell you this from the experience of talking also with other customers, every time the discussion moves in the area of reliability, global availability, quality of service, a standard that is not relying on the chipset from one vendor only, typically the preference in terms of future proof and future availability of the technology is more on the cellular technology, and in this case, Narrowband IoT. Another comment is, as I said before, Narrowband IoT is advertised since 1 year, 1.5 years, a lot. Just be aware that it is not the magic for all the possible solutions. If it is a small sensor sending a few bits every day is fine. If it is a complex device sending hundreds of kilobits per second every hour, even if it is stationary and even if it is not using voice, probably it is not the best technology and better to talk about Cat-M1. But in general, I really recommend you to look at your business case on one side and technical features on the other side. Then we can find the solutions for both the cases. And if the market is global and if you want to deploy everywhere without knowing in advance if the network is there or not, probably in the long run the cellular technology is better. But for some other applications, I'm not here to say that Sigfox and LoRa are not good. As I said, we have RE866 that is based on LoRa, so it means that we believe also on this technology, at least in the short term. Market researches are showing that in the long run, I'm talking about 2021, 2022, the new 3GPP licensed technologies are going to cross in terms of growth, the unlicensed. So this seems to confirm the opinion that I just gave you. Okay, so
yeah, no more questions. If you want, you can. If you have a question left, you can write in the chat. We'll wait like for a few seconds, minutes. But if there are no questions left,
or otherwise, Dominic, if you will get anything else later, just drop me an email and I will answer offline.
I will collect the emails. So if you just want to respond to our newsletter at roundsolutions.com email address, we can forward your questions also to Marco, and we'll send out an email to you back with the answer. There's just another question incoming. So Marco, if you have a couple of minutes left, should I give you the question?
Yeah, I still have a couple of minutes, so let's try to answer this one as well.
So the question is, 2G is going to pass in 4 years or something. Is that correct?
Not totally correct. I made the example of Swisscom that is announcing a shutdown in 2020. That means 3 years from now, even if, of course, something could change because they are starting to realize that they have a lot of IoT applications or M2M products in the field that could not stay immediately on without coverage. But most of the major operators are at least verbally giving commitment till 2025 at least. That means 8 years from now. So this is much more than 4 or 5. It's more a matter of, as I said, local deployments versus global deployment. If you want to be in the global market and exporting your solutions everywhere, you must be very careful of 2G shutdown in US, in Australia, in Korea, etc., etc.
And is there any specified data for Latin America? That's the next question here, about 2G shutdown, especially in Brazil.
No, I would say that for 2G in Latin America, we can be even more relaxed than Europe for the simple reason that 4G is not yet at a good level of maturity. And all the requests that we are having from Latin America for 4G applications are still asking a full fallback to 3G and to 2G. So I would say that they are kind of a follower in terms of adoption of the new technologies. There are pilots and trials of the new technologies. Just to mention an example that comes to my mind, Telefonica has a narrowband IoT open lab in Chile, but this is a way to promote the new technologies. Doesn't mean that they are going to remove the legacy technology. So honestly, I would be really relaxed for the next year's coverage in Brazil, for example.
Okay. Yeah, he will relax, he says. Okay, so okay. Marco, I think we're done here. I thank you very much for your time. It was very, very nice to have you here.
I thank you for the time that you gave me, and I hope that it was at least a bit useful to have a first insight of the market. Then, of course, we can go more in details when needed.
Yeah, perfect. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions left, feel free to ask us at the newsletter at roundsolutions.com, and we will forward it. Yeah, and we'll send you an email with the presentation as a PDF file, and in a couple of days we'll send you also the link to the video. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and wish you a wonderful day. Have a nice time, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye.